Let's take a look at this question. An individual has the following genotypes. For each genotype, how many genetically different gametes could the individual produce via meiosis? So here we're taking a look at one individual. Let's take a look at this one with that particular genotype. And what we're trying to figure out is how many genetically different gametes, sperm or egg cells, depending on if it's male or female, this individual could produce. And so here we have a homozygous dominant individual for this particular trait. And what you can see here is that the individual can either pass on a big A or a big A. There's not a lot of choice. So really, there's only one genetically different gamete that it could produce because you don't have that many choices. Let's next take a look at this individual. Here we have to get a little creative and look at all of the potential combinations for all of the different genes, for the gene A, gene B, and gene C, and what all the combinations could look like. So you could have a combination from this individual through meiosis that produces a sperm or an egg with big A, big B, and big C. You could also have another combination of big A, big B, and little c. You can also have a combination of little a, big B, and big C, or little a, big B, and little c. Now you see that because the individual is homozygous in the B's, it's always going to pass on a big B. However, because there are heterozygote conditions in both the A and the C gene, we get a variety of distinct genetically different gametes that can be produced. In this case, 4. Let's take a look at this individual right here. What can be passed on? Well, when we look at the A's, the only option is a little a. That's all that that individual can pass on. The same is true for the B's. This individual can only pass on a big B. But now there's a difference in the C's. It can either pass on a big C or it can pass on a little c. And so here we're going to have 2. If we take a look at this individual, in the A's, it can only pass on a little a. For the B's, it can only pass on a big B. For the C's, it can only pass on a little c. For the D's, it can only pass on a big D, and for the E's, it can only pass on a little e. Now, there are no heterozygote conditions for any of those genes, and because of that, what we see is that there's only one genetically different gamete that can be produced. Now, when you look at these last 2 examples, you might start to think, oh my goodness, I have to sit here and create all of these different combinations of alleles that can be created. This could go on forever. So I want to jump down to question 2 because there is a shortcut in how to do this. So let's look at this question. The general rule for determining the number of genetically different gametes that can be produced via meiosis is 2n. So that's 2 to the n. What does the n stand for? Now, when you were looking at these individuals here, at the 4 that we worked through, the ones that have the most variations are those that have heterozygote conditions. Those that are homozygous really have reduced numbers of alleles that would create genetically different gametes. So when we take a look at this way of looking at these problems, 2 to the n is going to stand for the number of heterozygote alleles at the same loci. So, what does this mean? If we go back to these problems that we saw here, this first one, 2 to the n, would be 2 to the 0 because there are 0 heterozygote combinations here, and anything to power 0 is 1. Here we would have one pair that is in, here we would have 2 pairs that are heterozygotes. So that would be 2 to the 2, which is 4. Here in this example, we only have one of the genes that is heterozygote, so that would be 2 to the 1. And over here we have, again, 2 to the 0, which is 1. So now let's take a look at these last two questions, which get a little bit more complex. So how many total genes have gene pairs have that heterozygote conditions? So we have 1 for the A's, 2 for the B's, 3 for the C's, and 4 for the D's. So we have 2 to the 4, which is 16. So this individual could create 16 genetically different gametes. What about down here for this last one? We have 1 for the A's that is heterozygote, 2 for the B's, 3 for the C's, 4 for the D's, 5 for the E's, and F, it's actually a homozygous pair there. So what we have is 2 to the 5, which is 32 genetically different gametes. Okay, so this is how we can figure out how many genetically different gametes that individual can produce. The key is to look at the number of loci that have the heterozygote condition.